Hi guys, or should I say Wagwan guys. Welcome to Jamcan Journeys, our podcast series where we talk all things migrating or traveling from Jamaica to Canada or from anywhere in the world to Canada. I'm your host Dee. Let's get into it. On this episode, we're going to be talking about Canadian citizenship. If you guys haven't checked out my last video where I showed you a timeline of someone being granted citizenship in 4 months, please check it out. Today we're diving into one of the key requirements of becoming a Canadian citizen, residency. Of course, there are more requirements that you will need to meet in order to qualify for Canadian citizenship, but the details here is strictly about residency. The residency requirement is essentially the amount of time you need to have physically spent in Canada to qualify for citizenship. It's typically 1,095 days, which is equivalent to 3 years out of the 5 years preceding your application. That means within the last 5 years. If you're going to be signing your application form this year, 2024, we're speaking of the 5 years before that. So from 2019 to present. I've had many people ask the question, how do they calculate their time spent in Canada? Now, that's a very good question because it's not as easy as 1, 2, 3. I've went through the process. I've had to calculate my days. I've done the research and I'm going to break it down for you guys. What's interesting is that time spent in Canada, even before becoming a permanent resident, counts towards this requirement. Every day you spent in Canada as an authorized temporary resident or a protected person before becoming a permanent resident counts as a half a day up to a maximum of 1 year. You may be asking, who is a temporary resident? A temporary resident is someone who is authorized to stay in Canada as a visitor, student, worker, or a temporary resident permit holder. A protected person is someone who was found to be in need of protection or a convention refugee by the Immigration and Refugee Board or received a positive decision on a pre-removal risk assessment from the IRCC. So just to make this make sense for you guys, if you were in Canada as a temporary resident prior to becoming a permanent resident, some of that time could count towards your requirement. Time that does not count towards the residency requirement. If you are incarcerated, under a probation order, a paroled inmate, or illegally present in Canada, that is overstaying your visa, for example, this time will not count towards your residency requirement. Now, if you made a refugee claim, or you were included in a family member's refugee claim, you won't be credited from the date of the refugee claim until you receive a positive decision confirming that you are a protected person. Let's talk a little bit about how the calculation is done for the half days. If you are studying legally at a Canadian university for, let's say, 500 days, only 250 days would be credited as time spent in Canada. Because remember, each day before you became a permanent resident is considered a half day. Another key thing to note is that you have to be a permanent resident for at least 2 years. So you have to be a permanent resident for at least 2 years, and then the additional year can be for time that you previously spent in Canada if you meet the requirements. I'll give a real life example for those who may have gotten this far in the video and still do not understand. If I visited Canada as a temporary resident, I was authorized to be here for the time frame that I'll be speaking of. I was authorized to be in Canada. I was legal in Canada for that time. If I spent 3 years in Canada, and that 3 years, this is all example, that 3 years I was authorized to be here, I can use 1 year out of that 3 years to go towards my residency requirement. The key thing to note, in order for me to use 1 full year, I would need to use 2 years, because each day before I became a permanent resident is considered a half day. Of course, there are some exceptions which you can review on the IRCC website, or you can feel free to research it on your own, or find an immigration lawyer who can provide you with the answers that you're looking for. So in conclusion, I will be doing just a quick recap. Number 1, for the residency requirement, you would need to be in Canada physically for 1,095 days, which is equivalent to 3 years out of the 5 years preceding your application. So a time frame that I gave so you can have a clearer vision. Say you're going to be signing your plan on signing yours in August. So from August 2019 to August 2024 would be the 5-year bracket that you will be looking into. You'll be calculating the days based on that 5 years. Number 2, you have to be a permanent resident for 2 years. 3, time that you spent in Canada prior to becoming a permanent resident, authorized time that you spent, can potentially be credited towards your residency requirement. 4, if you were illegal in Canada for any period of time before you became a permanent resident, that time cannot be credited to you. Understanding the residency requirement is very crucial on your path to Canadian citizenship. It's a significant milestone, and knowing the ins and outs can make the process more seamless for you. Be sure to explore other resources such as the IRCC website. That's always a very good go-to as it relates to anything immigration, citizenship, permanent residency, as well as guidance from qualified individuals such as immigration lawyers or immigration consultants as you navigate this journey. Once again, this is Dee with Jam Can Journey Podcast. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.